what we mean by happiness. So I think we have been sold on to what I call a deep fake idea of happiness. You know how there's this thing about deep fakes that look better and nicer and more enticing than the truth. So we've been sold over and over again with a deep fake of happiness as to what makes you happy. But I like to think about happiness as a state. It's not a destination, right? And happiness is every time you find meaning, right? You find joy in what you do. You find happiness, right? And when you are happy, you're well, right? You can't have one without the other, right? Because if you're not well, it's really difficult to be happy. So, depending on the definition of what people say is happiness, because happiness doesn't show up as a laughter all the time, right? Happiness is really knowing that everybody is safe, everybody is with their loved ones, everyone has got food to eat, and everyone has an equal opportunity to live their dreams, that life is fair to them, right? And so that's what happiness means to me. And not what I would call the deep fake happiness, where I need to have these things before I can be happy. So, one of those things that I had to reflect upon is that the fact that happiness is the result of the way we live our life, right? It is not the cause. So, if you want happiness, you need to ask yourself, what is that gives me through meaning? And I will say through joy, because we find joy in meaning, right? And with that comes well-being, all right? And I think well-being is a lot more complex. And one of those ideas, a few days ago, I was watching a movie with my children, and there was this story of, I'm sure you'd have heard of this story about, this kid asking the grandfather, why are some people good and some people bad? And he says, well, we all of us have two sides to us, the dark side and the light side. And the child asked the grandfather, so, why do some people become good and some people become bad? And the grandfather said, it depends what you feed, right? Which part of you that you feed. And usually the story stops there, that you feed your good part, right? But a few days ago, I was reflecting, can you also overfeed your good part? All right. Or we talk about undernourishing our good part, but can you also overfeed? And what do I mean by that, by overfeeding, is that there are a lot of people who are really good who suffer, right? We suffer because we take on the responsibility of someone else. We become a caretaker of someone else's happiness, and by not empowering them, right? We do it in the name of love, but we suffer the consequences, because not only you are living the life for someone else, making choices for somebody else, and taking responsibility for someone else, right? You're overfeeding your goodness. And so that's one thing that is currently something that I think about a lot, because if you look at well-being, there are a lot of good people who suffer from ill-being because they don't know how to say no, and they take too much. They take much more than they should, because they think, I'm here to do these things, and they stretch themselves to point of not getting enough rest, to a point of illness, all right, and to a point of suffering. And I don't think being good means to suffer. Sorry, so that's one. But the other one is that when we overcare, we don't allow the other person to have a full life, because you're living on their behalf. And that's what I mean by overfeeding, right? Because I don't let you experience life. I don't let you make the right or wrong choices. I don't let you live your life, right? And that is the part about overcare where people suffer, right? So your question was whether happiness is a choice. I think happiness is dependent on the choices you make in your life and how conscious you are about the choices. And these choices are important, and you can't make these choices if you're not aware, if you don't know who you are. What do you stand for? Why are you here? What is important for you? What gives you joy? And I don't we don't meet many people who think about it that way. I think in the maybe perhaps previous generations, we had time to grow up. And I think the sad thing about young people is because you guys are really clever, right? Because there's a lot of progress in education. And so you come across very sophisticated in the way you learn, in the way you express. And I think there's a lot of pressure for young people who sound intelligent to also emotionally mature quickly. And I think that's unfair to the young people because we don't allow them to live their life and figure it out. It seems like everything is figured out for you in textbooks, in assignments, in your university degrees. And just because you read about it, you should know how to live it. Whereas I think where I come from, I think I'm on the luckier side because I had time to grow up. I had time to make mistakes, right? And that formed my experience. I had time to fail. I had time to pick myself up because I had enough time that was given to me as part of the growing up process, which I think a lot of young people, especially if they come from a space where they are given opportunities, the expectations are extremely high on them. So, on one hand, you're criticized for being privileged. On the other hand, the price of privilege is also very high. And that's something we don't talk about because we often talk about the underprivileged, right? And I think what is equal in one situation may not be equal in another situation. So I think it is really about giving every individual, every human, every soul a right to find itself, to find meaning,